Setting it up now. All right. Home. Oh, we are actually live, right?
Right. That's quiet.
That was hello, happy Friday. I hope you're all well. I can see Ivy's already tuning in. Hello. As usual, I'm Alex Cox, and today we have a very special live broadcast for you to commemorate the 80th anniversary of the Battle of Britain, which is of course today. I'm joined by a very special guest, someone I've been very looking forward to having on and speaking to, the Commonwealth War Graves Commission's commissioned historian, Lynelle Howson. Hello, Lynelle.
Hi, Alex, and hi, everyone. Thanks very much for having me.
Oh, no, thank you very much for coming on. I figured today is obviously a momentous occasion. 80 years ago today, obviously the German Air Force was significantly ramping up its attacks. I believe it began with an attack on a shipping convoy and a dockyard in North Wales. But of course, that was the start of something much bigger, the start of the Battle of Britain, which ran till October. And with that in mind, we thought it'd be a great idea to get you on, talk about the incredibly valuable work you and the Commonwealth War Graves Commission do, the records you hold, which obviously we're very proud to also host on our site. And yeah, just basically a bit of a general chat about this big anniversary and how people can go about tracking down their ancestors who lost their lives in war.
Well, that sounds like it will only take a few minutes. So I look forward to all of them. It's definitely a pleasure to be here and to speak to you. And I love any opportunity to talk about the wonderful organization, the brilliant colleagues I have, the hard work we do everywhere. But most importantly, the reason why we exist, which is the 1.7 million servicemen and women that we were created to commemorate.
That's a lot. I mean, it's an incredibly poignant and important subject, and it looks like people, there's certainly an interest for this because we've already got quite a lot of people tuning in. So I'll just say a few quick hellos. So hello to Hillary, Rosie, Anya, Jackie, Shirley, Ian, Virginia, Gail. Oh, watching from Madison in Wisconsin. Virginia's watching from California. Hello. And happy 4th of July for last week. Hello. Paul, lovely to see you as always, Paul, William, Linda, Judith, Elaine, almost too many to mention. If I carry on reading through these, we will be here all afternoon. But yeah, what I would like to say to everybody who's tuning in, if you're tuning into this for the first time, we do these every single week. It's an opportunity for us to share what's going on behind the scenes, things we're working on, discoveries, important historical anniversaries such as today, but it's also an opportunity for family history fans to connect with each other and chat and bond over a shared passion. So if you are a complete beginner and you're wondering how to get started, this is a very good place to start. You can ask some questions in the comments, and I'm sure that our more experienced audience members will jump at the chance to help you. And Lynelle and myself will be answering questions to the best of our ability at the end of the broadcast. So if you do have any questions about your wartime ancestors, or more specifically the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, the work they do, the records they hold, and how to search them, please do pop them in the comments. We've also got Niall from my team who's keeping a close eye on everything you're saying. So yeah, join the conversation. And well, with that out the way, before we dive in, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself, Lynelle, and your background and your work?
Sure. Personally, I'm a person of the Commonwealth, so working for the Commonwealth War Graves Commission is a nice fit for me.
I thought I could detect, is it an Antipodean accent?
Well, it just means I'm not being tidy enough about picking one and sticking to it. I have grown up in many parts of the world. Most of them belong to the British Empire at some point. Some as far back as the 1700s, others more recently, still dominions of the Queen. So my husband's Australian, which just generally means I don't cheer for Australia at things like the cricket, etc. On principle, obviously. So yeah, Commonwealth through and through for me. So it's wonderful to work for an organization which likewise is thoroughly bedded in the Commonwealth. Our work is supported by 6 member governments. And I'm sure those of you at home either know these already or can probably guess them right now. What do we think the 6 might be? Alex, you've probably cheated and looked it up.
You put me on the spot now. I'm going to embarrass myself.
Have a think. British Empire.
So Canada, Australia, New Zealand. That's 3. India. Oh dear. So I'm on half. Is it 8? Did you say?
6.
So 6. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, India. Oh dear. The last 2, and it's going to be so obvious. Go on, what are they?
Well, South Africa.
Of course, South Africa.
And hang on a minute, you haven't said the United Kingdom.
Okay, yeah, that I'm going to slap myself on the wrist for that. And I'm especially annoyed about the South African one because I was literally reading about the South African pilot yesterday, so I really should have got that. But yeah,
that's all right.
I mean, that gives you an idea of the sheer scale of your organisation. And
yep, certainly.
How many sites in total is it that you look after?
So we do our work, that would be cemeteries with war graves and memorials for those who have no known grave or graves we can't mark. And we do that work in 150 countries and territories around the world and at over 23,000 locations.
That's an awful lot.
It is an awful lot.
That must take quite a lot of organisation.
Well, we have a lot of very brilliant and dedicated local staff in those 150 countries and territories. The head office is here in the United Kingdom, in Maidenhead, and otherwise we've got a large presence, of course, in France and Belgium, as people would guess. But actually, our 3rd highest country of commemorations is, in fact, the United Kingdom, and that is because of that's because of the memorials, like the one behind me.
I was going to say, your background.
Yes, and also the naval dead of the Royal Navy who were lost or buried at sea are commemorated by memorials here in the United Kingdom, no matter where in the world the incident occurred. So a ship may have gone down with all hands off the coast of South America, but those people will be commemorated on memorials here in the United Kingdom. Also true for the Merchant Navy. So we do a lot by numbers. A lot of our commemoration is here in the United Kingdom on those large and some smaller memorials. For instance, if you were in the Fleet Air Arm, so those are pilots that fly off of carriers, and you need to be on a memorial, your memorial is in Lyon, Solent in this country. So that's where the Fleet Air Arm are.
Oh, wow. And how would they go about making decisions where to position monuments like that? I mean, I know, for example, the place you're virtually joining us from now is the absolutely stunningly beautiful memorial at Runnymede, and I believe wasn't that chosen for because it's quite near the site where Magna Carta was signed or something?
Yeah. So the choosing of this site was sort of a fortuitous confluence of different factors. An important factor actually was that a very kind benefactor who owned the land that the memorial is now on was willing to give the commission that land for a memorial. And the commission has always tried to execute its commemoration responsibilities with a minimum of pressure on the public purse. So if somebody wishes to donate to us a beautiful piece of land on which we can build a memorial, then that would certainly be a factor to consider. But as you say, it's a wonderfully evocative location, being above the Thames River and above the fields of Runnymede where the Magna Carta was signed. It's also, because it's on the top of the ridge, you get an incredible view over that part of southern England. And if you imagine, for instance, the Battle of Britain, which we're mostly talking about today, if you had stood up there in 1940, you would have seen fighters and German aircraft whizzing around in the sky and, battling in a way that's oddly picturesque from the ground, but of course quite terrifying to actually be up there in the tiny cockpit by yourself, doing those things. So it's a beautiful place up a hill with a wonderful view of both Windsor Castle and across to Heathrow. And of course, the skies of southern England. What better place to put a memorial to the air services. So, you know, men and women who aspects, or every aspect for some of their service, had to do with being up in the air, being up in the sky. Well, we can talk a bit more about that later. But in terms of the other memorials, so the naval memorials were chosen to be in the 3 most important naval ports for the end of the First World War. So that's Plymouth, Portsmouth, and Chatham.
Oh, yeah.
Lyon-Solent was chosen because it was connected with the Fleet Air Arm as well. All of them make sense. I'm not going to go through all of them and explain but, right now, but all of them are connected to a particular reason why it would be a good idea to have a memorial there. So the Plymouth, Portsmouth, and Chatham ones, both where they are and how they look, mean that you really can see them from out to sea for quite a long way. They're built to be a leader marker for people using the harbours to be able to come in and see them, to know where they are, a bit like a lighthouse. Without being a lighthouse. So they're all in beautiful and poignant locations in that way. But in terms of who gets commemorated upon them, that's decided in the Navy by which of those 3 ports you were connected to for administrative purposes, which sounds boring to say, but you have to decide some way, somehow, where to put people. And that's how the Navy decided for those 3.
Well, we've already got some fantastic questions coming through, so I'm making a note of some of them. But before we, obviously, I know we're here to talk. A lot of the focus will be on airmen and the Battle of Britain, but a lot of people, myself included, will probably be a bit ignorant of the Commission's actual history. So, when did it all begin, and what prompted that?
Well, it's just a super interesting story, but I'll try to keep it to the high points. The Commonwealth War Graves Commission, as we know it today, was created as the Imperial War Graves Commission over 100 years ago in 1917. So if those keen on history among you will know that the First World War was still going in 1917. But that's when our charter was signed by the King, and was arranged that we would then be in a position to take over the building and the maintaining of war graves, cemeteries, and memorials as it was possible after the war was finished. In many ways, the War Graves Commission is tied to the vision of one man, Sir Fabian Ware, who in 1914 was too old to fight, but he joined the Royal Red Cross and was in charge of a mobile ambulance unit in France in 1914. And he and his unit noticed that there were lots of these graves, you know, by the wayside, in fields, in orchards, that had been left behind by the army as it retreated from the Battle of the Marne. And they were concerned that if no one kept track of where these graves were, that in the end they would be lost. And all of the effort that comrades had gone to bury and to mark the position of their friends who they'd lost in battle, that would come to nothing. So they started to keep track of these things. Later that became subsumed into the army as the Army Directorate of Graves Registration, and then inquiries in order to liaise with the families. And then the work of the DGRE was turned by Royal Charter into the work of the IWGC. So the organization was going to pick up and carry forward the work that had been begun by the military authorities during the war. So basically, during the war, you get buried, if this is overseas, you get buried by the military authorities, and they turn over those sites to the Commission, and the Commission then designs them architecturally, puts the permanent features in, does the wonderful horticulture that we're still very well known for.
Yeah,
our gardens are simply amazing.
Generally beautiful, aren't they?
Yeah. And then take over the commemoration records and make all of those available to members of the public. So our work today is basically really the same as the work was designed to be in 1917. We're still here to commemorate either on graves or on memorials by name the serving men and women of the British Empire and the Commonwealth now today. And we're so very proud and happy to be able to do that. It is an incredible job. You learn something new every day, but also every day you find yourself having to pause and look at something and just think, quite sobering thoughts about what it is
course.
that you're looking at.
I mean, just looking at the background behind you with all those thousands of names listed, it's quite. I mean, it's so easy to think, just look at it and think, wow, what a terrible cost. But the other step is reminding yourself that every single one of those represents a life. People who left behind loved ones, people who had hopes and dreams they never got to fulfill. It's really quite humbling, I guess.
It is.
And all the Commonwealth War Graves sites I've had the pleasure of visiting, Runnymede definitely is up there in my favourites. There is a real sense of serenity there. They're really serene, peaceful, beautiful places. And am I right in thinking the background where you're sat now, is that the Commonwealth Arms? Because when I was only there a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things that really hit home for me was how truly international the memorial was, and the sheer numbers of Commonwealth Canadians, Australians, New Zealanders, I was genuinely surprised to see.
It is a very international monument. It is a memorial that isn't just supported by all of our member governments through the way they support all of our work, but specifically there are members from every one of those countries commemorated on that memorial. So all of the 6 that we talked about before. In addition, the nationalities that you see on that memorial that you're talking about comes from being able to read things like the Royal Canadian Air Force, right?
Yeah.
But there are lots and lots of people who served in those units, but who came from somewhere else. So there are plenty of Canadians who were not serving in the Canadian Air Force, but were serving in the Royal Air Force.
Oh, wow. I didn't.
Yeah, and likewise, for those in America, who may be listening, we have quite a few Americans that we commemorate. Now, we commemorate them because they belonged to British Empire units. This is true of both the First and the Second World War. So if an American decided that they wanted to take part in either of the world wars, and they didn't want to wait for the United States to get involved, or they felt very much that they wanted to join a Commonwealth or Empire unit, they did. And if they died in that service, then they are our responsibility to commemorate, which means we have, they're not really hidden, but they can seem hidden unless you realize that they're there. We have people from all over the world, born in different places, raised in different places, both inside the empire and outside of the empire, behind the names that you can see behind me.
Yeah.
The photograph here is of Runnymede Memorial. It was actually taken by a colleague of mine a year ago. And if I just sort of shift out the way, you can see that almost every alcove has an offering that someone has left for someone whose name is inscribed on that book, because the names are open across a window to look like open volumes of rolls of honor. It's absolutely stunning, especially when the light streams in from the little thin windows that divide them. And people come there all the time to leave things for people. But this photo being taken a year ago is obviously full of more than usual because of the anniversary of the Battle of Britain, because at this time of year, more people come either for the beginning or for Battle of Britain Day. So a few more tributes are laid, but it's incredible. I remember the first time I went there for work, it was shortly after a Valentine's Day, and one of the tributes that caught my eye was some fresh flowers and a card. The card had been left on behalf of, because I think she was too elderly to go up there herself now, someone whose fiance had been killed in the Second World War flying.
Oh, wow.
And he was there on the list behind the flowers, and she had she'd chosen never to marry. She was now well into her 80s and 90s, and I think she may well have sent a floral tribute up every year to remember her lover that she had lost. And it's that sort of thing that just really reminds you what the organization is here to facilitate, here to provide a place that is, as you said, a quiet place of contemplation, and also somewhere that's a fitting tribute to the men and women that are owed this debt of honor, that really require, in my view, places like this for us to go and remember them, whether we know them personally or whether we just appreciate as a body who they were and what they did.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so relevant to so many people. I mean, I guess one of the things you have to remember is that for people with families from the countries that were involved in these conflicts, I mean, especially so for Britain, I think practically every British family had someone that was killed in the First World War, and of course many in the Second as well. I mean, my mother's side and my father's side, I have great aunts and uncles that were killed in France. And so if anybody out there knows that they had a relative that lost their lives in conflict, how would they go about, what would you recommend their first step should be? How would they go about finding out more?
Well, my recommendation, always and without any side eye at the wondrous organization that is Findmypast or any other online repository of information, is that if you think or if you know of someone who you're pretty sure died in the First or the Second World Wars fighting in or with British Empire forces, you would go to our website and you would look them up. Now, I'm happy to share my screen and give a little example of how we might do that, but it's always better if we have someone of interest to look up. So I wondered if you had anyone in mind.
I did, yes. This is a story that I came across while researching our newspapers the other day, and a great reminder of how different resources overlap each other. So I was looking through the newspapers. I wanted to find out a little bit about, obviously there's that famous line about the Battle of Britain, never before in the history of human conflict has so much been known by so many to so few. And I was thinking, who are the few? Who were these guys? And I read the incredibly sobering stat that on average Battle of Britain pilots were about 20 years old and they had a life expectancy of about 4 weeks. And then I stumbled across this chap called Pilot Officer Brian Mica, who was literally a prime example of this. He was a Hurricane pilot. He was 21 years of age when the battle started. And he lost his life 6 weeks into the battle. He was a certified ace. He flew with 429 Squadron, which I believe was one of the most one of the highest scoring fighter squadrons of the war. In fact, I think they were the only squadron to win a Victoria Cross. But remarkably, basically, when he was killed on the 27th of September, his grieving parents donated a diary that he kept for his own amusement to the Air Ministry, and they were printed in British newspapers throughout the December of 1940. And if anyone watching is curious about this, we have posted a blog on the site where you can read Mica's diaries in full. But the thing I just found so amazing about them was that it's such an amazing insight into the mind and experiences of this incredibly young man who is basically one of about 3,000 people that's, responsible for the fate of millions. And I won't go into too much detail because we don't have too much time. And as I said, people can read this on the blog, but reading them, you really do get a sense of youth and bravado. And also aggression, he going up very much with the intention to fight. And when he didn't get a fight, he was quite disappointed by it. I mean, so there are quotes here saying, just roaming, so September the 4th, 2 scrambles, 9:20 and 12:30, no contact made and no fun at all. Just roaming around looking for Hun in the sun. Watched bombers in the dark, parachute flares, AA bursts all over the sky. Slept well. There's such a strange contrast and this devil-may-care attitude is one of the things that really came out. I mean, I particularly love extracts where there's heavy bombing raids over London. So, what would be the sensible thing to do? We'll drive into London and have a look. And he talks about going down the pub and everyone shaking his hand and getting, being very grateful to see him. I love a bit as well where the bombs are dropping around them. And he says, redacted, because obviously a lot of names were redacted, drives like an absolute demon along the street and skids to a stop. Bus driver pulls up beside us and says, come on, mate, turn it up. You're on the blinking floor this time. Laughter mingles with bomb crashes everywhere. I think that really encapsulates that kind of, keep your chin up, smile on your face, carry on attitude. But yeah, there are some really vivid descriptions of dogfights, and you sobering reminders how deadly being a pilot really was. I'll only read one more extract here. So he flew alongside, I guess another thing to mention is a lot of his pals in 249 Squadron were very international. So his best friends were a chap called Butch Barton, who was Canadian, a chap called Percy Burton, who was South African, and a chap called Ginger Neal, who was a Scouser, I believe. Burton and Mica actually were both killed on the 27th. They both lost their lives on the same day. But here's just a quick extract of him hunting Dorniers with Butch. He says, attacked en masse, then dived away as fighters came down, joined Butch again after a frantic tail-wagging breakaway, and started after the bombers again. Suddenly we see a Dornier coming towards us, running for home. We jump on it. Butch sits on its tail, pumping lead at it. I do quarter attacks. He doesn't like this. Lumps fall off and smoke pours out. I am wide awake now and feeling very hungry. But Butch says, don't waste any more ammunition on him. This guy's finished. The Dornier heads for Rochford. He's a wreck. Rudders in ribbons and pieces falling off all the time. I see him hit the ground, bounces. It's an incredible record. And so everybody read those blogs. You can read more about the amazing Brian Mica and his incredible story. But tragically, as we said before, with a life expectancy of not much more than 4 weeks, he was killed when he exited his airplane, hit the tail, and was found 2 miles away from his aircraft. His parachute had never opened. And one of the things that made me think as well was unusually about the Battle of Britain was this maybe one of the only engagements that servicemen were dying above or on British soil in relatively large numbers.
That's true for air dead, but also for sea dead.
Yes.
And of course, sometimes they combine, as in an airman might be killed either over the sea or in a crash into the sea, but close enough for his body to be recovered, in which case he, or indeed she, could be buried in a known grave rather than being commemorated on Runnymede. Some of the people commemorated on Runnymede did crash in UK waters, but it wasn't possible to retrieve their remains. One of them actually is the quite famous pilot Amy Johnson of 1930s fame. She, when the war began, took up war work with the Air Transport Auxiliary. Now, the Air Transport Auxiliary was both men and women flew for the ATA, and their job sounds dull, but in fact was very challenging and not dull at all, which is that you had to show up to any factory or like maintenance airfield in the country, get into whatever plane it was that they expected you to fly, and fly it from the tiniest ones to the biggest ones. And I have to say that the ones coming out of factories, sometimes they came out with things wrong with them that you didn't know until you took the plane up into the air. So if someone had made a mistake building that plane, just a little mistake even, it might actually make the difference between life and death, as could how good you were as a pilot. Because imagine if you went up and then suddenly something went wrong with one of your, with an aileron or with an engine or anything like that. If you were very, very good at flying, you might be able to get that plane down and yourself in one piece. So actually they were very talented pilots. And lots of women flew for the ATA, including Amy Johnson, and she was lost in bad weather and crashed into the Thames estuary and has no known grave. So her name is on the Runnymede Memorial. So if you came across Mr. Mica, and you knew his names, you could pop to our website and have a look to see where he was commemorated, and also to verify things like date of death and other details that you might think that you know about the person and their family. This would help. This would help anybody to then continue to find out more about the person, because our source of information is not 100% always perfectly accurate, because of course 1.7 million people, records made by humans are going to have human error in them. But in general, ours were supplied by the military authorities, who ought to have known what they were doing, and also they were verified where possible by next of kin. So they're a good solid place to start. So if we say Mica, I think that's how his name is spelled.
M-E-A-K-E-R, I think.
And what are his initials?
He had quite a lot. So he was known, but I love the fact they all have nicknames like Butch and things, but his was a bit boring. So his full name was James Reginald Brian Mica, but his pals knew him as Brian.
So because I think we probably do know his names, I'm going to go ahead and put them in the first name field. Now, this combination, I would probably just hit search straight away with the odds being in my favor that this guy would be the first one to come up. But if you were searching for someone and they had quite common names, or you didn't really know, you only had surname and initial, then other things you know about the person, you could put in your initial search to make your results smaller. So for instance, if you're sure the person that you are looking up died in the Second World War, you can check the box for Second World War, so you won't be bothered with any First World War answers.
That will help, because when I looked for him before, he was the, not to give too much away, he was the only Mica, one of the few Micas I found for the second, but I found many more for the first.
Yeah, so if you were looking up someone and you just know, there's no way that the information you have is so bodgy that you're confused one war to the other, although that does happen when people are working with sort of dodgy memories in the family and what have you. I suppose you could be out by a war, but hopefully you've got that. You can also modify your search by these things, which can be very helpful. If you know that they were in the Army or the Air Services or the Merchant Navy, you could narrow your search by that. If you're absolutely sure you know the date of death, or you can put in a date range if you want that. But really the simplest way is usually if you've got last name and a pretty good idea of first names or initials, then you're probably going to find the guy. So let's hit search and see what we find. And lo and behold, he is the very first option. In fact, the only option, the only Mica for the Second World War, spelled in that way. So now we can have a look at what you would usually see when you look somebody up on our website. So you click through to the person's specific casualty record. And this confirms that from our perspective, we are commemorating a pilot officer pilot, Mica James Reginald Bryan, service number, date of death, age at death, but this is only if the family told us the person's age.
So the military, that service number that's the key to everything else, isn't it? That's such a valuable piece of information.
It can be very helpful. For the Second World War, it is very helpful. For the First World War, it is not the magical solution to everything, because people's service numbers did change in the First World War. But in the Second World War, it can help you tell the difference between one William Smith and another William Smith, which is jolly nice. So we only have an age if next of kin told us the age. Likewise, we will only have this kind of information, son of Edgar Reginald and Lucy Adelaide Kathleen Mica of West Dean, if the military authorities or the commission were in contact with the next of kin. So there are many people you will look up that do not have full names here, like James Reginald Bryan. It'll just have initials. They won't have an age, and they won't have any register entry here. And that's because either they did not have any next of kin, or the next of kin had not returned contact. So this is the kind of stuff that if you're looking up someone that you've not done any work on before, this is all important little breadcrumbs that might help you in your further search for this person. It might give you their branch of service if you didn't know whether they were Army, Air Force, Navy. It might tell you specifically a squadron number, super helpful. It should confirm their date of death, although it's helpful for people to know that sometimes the date of death is actually a range. So it might be between two dates. Because of the circumstances, it might not have been possible to tell which side of midnight you might have died, for instance, or which in a few days of fighting when you might have gone missing and then been proved to be dead. The other thing you can see here is what was inscribed on his headstone if he has a personal inscription, but we'll come back to that. So it tells you where he's buried, which is a place called West Dean Cemetery in Sussex. Now, I would immediately scroll back up and see that's where his parents live. So this is someone who has been buried privately by a family where they wish to bury the person in a cemetery near them.
And was that common?
It was, well, I mean, common is hard to quantify, but I would say yes, very common. If in both World Wars, your next of kin was present in the United Kingdom and your body was present in the United Kingdom, the next of kin could exercise their right to receive the body and bury it as they saw fit. This is why we commemorate people in over 12,000 locations in this country, because so many families did take the body of their loved one and then bury them where they wished, in a family plot, in a grave they organized specially under the circumstances, things like that. So he, my assumption would be, buried by his parents in Westdean because they live in Westdean.
Yeah,
and what you can see in our documents, this is a scan of the original register, but that won't tell you anything new because the register entry has already been, like you've already read the comment about it. So you can see here he is. So this tells you what we already know: pilot, officer, pilot, his name, service number, DFC, RAF, squadron. Yeah, so we already know that. This is a graves registration report showing that we have registered his grave in this particular cemetery. So again,
oh wow, are these available anywhere online? Yeah.
This is online, anyone can look at these.
Oh wow.
So this says that he's got a CH, so that's a commission headstone when the GRR was done. It says that the grave is maintained by relatives, so it's a private grave. This is PR for private over here under remarks. So the grave belongs to relatives. The commission headstone we installed in agreement with them. If they had wanted to keep their own headstone over the grave, they would have, that's fine. Many people marked graves as they saw fit. And then when the commission contacted them to say, would you like a commission marker? Many of them said, no, thank you. We like the marker that we have. So lots and lots and lots, I mean, thousands of graves in this country are war graves, but they don't have the commission headstone on that you would that you might expect when you walk into the churchyard or the cemetery. That was an offer that was made to the families, and they either said yes or no. If they said yes, they sent something in that I'm going to show you and your viewers that you can't see on the website.
Oh, we love a scoop.
This is Mica's final form for verification. So this form here was sent out to the next of kin for them to verify the information that was going to be carved on the headstone. Now, the reason why you can't see this online for this casualty is because it's a Second World War document. And I'm sure everyone will understand that there are data protection rules in force still that govern the access to some Second World War era information. For instance, service records in this country are still with the Ministry of Defense. They're not in the National Archives, etc. So I can show this to you because we know that everybody mentioned on it is dead. So it's not leading to anyone who is alive, and the address isn't private. But that's why we can't release them online like we can the other pieces of paper I just showed you. So if we have a look at this, the writing in green is the writing from the commission to say what we know. And the writing in black is I think his father filling in this form to send it back. So you can see that he has chosen to write in the place of the casualty. He's understood this to mean where the death occurred. That isn't actually what it means. You can see what it means to us. It means where is the casualty buried. So we've said Westdean Cemetery. But he's written near Battle, Sussex, and then he's also written in Battle of Britain. So it's really important to him, the father, it seems, to really record the fact that this isn't just any casualty. This is a casualty of the Battle of Britain.
Yeah.
And then you can see that they filled in that he was 21 when he died and that he was born in Kinsale in County Cork, and the names of both of his parents. And then they're asking whether on the headstone they want a cross engraved, and they've said yes, they would like a cross. But here in line 16, this is the best part, I think, always of these. This is the parents saying what personal inscription they would like on this person's headstone. And they've written, these men were very good unto us. They were a wall unto us by night and by day. So they're really not just writing about their own son, but they're writing about the few. They're writing about the fighter pilots of Britain in 1940.
Such a personal document, that, isn't it? I'm feeling quite emotional, actually.
Yeah, it's really brilliant looking at these, and you can see it's signed by the father. There's his signature, and there's their address when he sent it in. This is 1944 as the stamp. Yew Tree Cottage, West Dean. And that's
sorry, Lynelle, I think I've just had a message from one of my colleagues. Apparently, we can't see the form on screen. Are you?
Oh no!
Ooh.
Hang on. Maybe if I open it another way. I don't know, because I can see it. Hold on. That's weird. So is the screen black? Okay, well, I'm going to stop sharing. And if I think of how to get it up later, I'll pull it up later and we can say, hey, let's have a look at it. But like you were saying, it's incredible to see the personal inscription, which of course you can see on the website, as I showed. If we've got a personal inscription on the headstone, you can read it on our website, or of course you can go to where the grave is and you can read it for yourself on the base of the headstone. And they're an incredibly powerful way of linking you really to either a quality about the person that's buried there or something about the family and what they remember them for. Which I think it's the thing that is guaranteed to really make you feel the humanity of the person we commemorate, and also of the family that lost them. So I always look at those when I'm in cemeteries, or when I'm looking at paperwork. I think, well,
as you said, you can. It's just one short sentence, but you feel like you can really get a sense of the parents' pride, and maybe that's how they coped with the loss of their son, by rationalizing it and
in that way. My colleague, our wonderful chief archivist, Andrew Featherston, who I'm sure is very much looking forward to being allowed to have visitors come back and look in his archive, so do watch for announcements of that being possible again. But he found for me a letter from another Royal Air Force bereaved family who, when they were asked if they wanted a personal inscription, they replied, and we both thought this was just amazing. They replied, I want to read it to get it absolutely spot on. We feel that no inscription is called for. For Flight Officer RAF is all that could be desired by any man.
Wow.
So that's what they said powerful. They felt about their son. And he's buried in St. Andrew Churchyard in Tangmere. RAF nerds will know that there was an RAF Tangmere that was involved in the Battle of Britain. And actually that is the location of Mica's close friend who was killed on the same day as he was killed. He's buried in Tangmere, St. Andrew Churchyard. Yes, Percy Burton is there, and Percy Burton is there because his next of kin were not in the United Kingdom. So unlike Mica, whose body could be claimed by his parents, as you'll know, he was from South Africa, so his parents were not here. So he was buried by the RAF, and he was buried in the quite large group of Air Force burials that we have in St. Andrew Churchyard in Tangmere.
And is that were many so for Commonwealth pilots, and I know there were pilots that weren't. There were a lot of Czechs, there was a lot of Poles, a lot of French pilots. If they were killed and buried in British soil, was it common for families to request the bodies to be repatriated after the war?
Well, for Empire or Commonwealth forces, no repatriation was allowed. So there was a law that said no repatriation. Yeah, that was the First World War law, and it was used again in the Second World War. So no, they couldn't. The official line was no repatriation. But that's partly why the commission exists, is because if you're going to tell people who have the ability that they cannot have their sons, then you really do owe it to them to have cemeteries in which their sons can be looked after as well as or better than a family would be able to look after them. So that's partly why we exist also.
Consider the incredible sacrifice. I mean, Burton's story really stuck with me because he was killed by ramming a Messerschmitt to bring it down with him. He was low on fuel, low on ammunition. He rammed it, knowing full well that he wouldn't survive the crash, severed the tail, and that is how he lost his life. Incredibly heroic. When you think that these were men who were in their early 20s, as someone who's significantly older than that now, I find that incredibly sobering. Another thing I wanted to ask you about, because I can see actually we've had quite a few questions about this, was civilian war dead. There's quite a few people in the comments were asking, do you record civilian war dead? If you do, where would they find them?
Yes, brilliant. Thank you so much. This was on my list of things I wanted to talk about, so I'm very happy that the questions have come in, so I don't even have to follow my list. This is brilliant. So of course we do know now that we're thinking of the Battle of Britain that that famously people think of the phrase the few, that never in the field of human conflict has so much been owed by so many to so few. But speaking on behalf of lots of war dead that we commemorate, I have to say the few wasn't just fighter pilots. And in fact, if you were to go and look at Churchill's speech in which he gives this line, he spends more time in that speech talking about Bomber Command and Coastal Command than he does about the fighters. So if anyone's interested, you can easily go read full text of any of Churchill's speeches. Go have a look at this one and you'll see the paragraph before and after are definitely about bombing, not just about fighters. In no way to minimize the bravery and the importance of what the fighters were doing, but they're only one piece of the story. But another piece of the story is, of course, the civilians. This is a battle that is being fought on their behalf, but over their heads. And civilians are working on RAF bases, as are ground crew and Women's Auxiliary Air Force personnel. And for the Battle of Britain, some of the main targets for the Luftwaffe was, of course, the RAF aerodromes from which all of these squadrons were operating. So it was dangerous. They were really in the front line. But in some ways, all of Britain was in the front line when the Germans decided they're going to start bombing cities, which of course they do in September 1940. So I had a look and short answer, yes, we commemorate civilian war dead, but not a lot of people know that. I'm not going to do the accent that goes with that quote. So we commemorate by name on rolls of honor that are physically in Westminster Abbey in St. George's Chapel. About 67,000 civilians who died in the Second World War.
Whoa!
We are not responsible for their graves, but we are responsible to make sure that their names are permanently commemorated, just as we would permanently commemorate people on memorials who don't have known graves. So that's 67,000. And the thing that really struck me when I was doing some number preparation for this is, of course, I went to have a look how many Commonwealth Air Services dead we have for July, August, September, October 1940, and generally the period that from a British perspective we see as the Battle of Britain. And then I did the same for our civilian roll of honor. And there are many thousands more civilians than there are air services dead. Far, far more, far more. Wow. So you can look up civilians the same way that you just saw me look up Mica, who is a service dead. The challenge with the civilians is that if you don't know a civilian's specific name, you can feel a bit like, how do I find them? So if you know that a member of your family was killed in the Blitz, you ought to be able to type in their name, surname, first name, or surname initials, and find them as a civilian war dead person. But what you can also do is, as long as you know the name of the district you're interested in as it was called in 1939. So I know that your users will, if they're fans of Findmypast, they'll probably understand that sometimes records of the past reflect how people organize data in the past rather than how we think about them today. So there might be, so there were rural districts, there were municipal districts, and there were boroughs. So if you know the borough or district in which you live today, you can look that up. So Alex, we were talking before and you thought that yours was probably, what did you say, Twickenham?
Twickenham, yeah, that'll be me.
Yeah. So here's a tip on our website. Now let me share my screen again and see if I can show you this. Yes, please, that one. I hope everybody can see it. No, why is it? Hold on. I swear I had this organized so it would be right where I wanted it. Now, there we go. Okay. So if I do a new search, you're still going to find war dead, but then, and I know, just bear with me, this is just how it works. Go to Cemetery and Memorial and type in, let's go Twickenham, and then a comma. And up comes Twickenham Municipal Borough. So I'm telling you that this means we're going to find out how many civilian war dead that Twickenham Borough reported to the Commission after the Second World War. And that number is 150.
Whoa, that is significantly more than 150.
150, yes.
That's a lot more than I would have anticipated. I mean, I know we're part of London, but we're very much on the outskirts, and I can't think there'd be any heavy industry around here. Or
well, the bombing campaign was not, let's say, pinpoint accurate on either side. Also bombers would jettison bombs sometimes.
Oh, sorry, I think we're having options with screen share. I think
again.
I don't think that's come up. Doesn't matter. We've still got the information.
Yeah. So if you know the name of the borough or the district that you're interested in, you can pull it up, and then you can take those results away out into Excel in a spreadsheet, which can mean it's easier for you to find out sort of, I don't know, the worst day of bombing in Twickenham or something like that, which is something that I had looked at before. I had a look at Ealing before, and sorry, I want to quit sharing. Have I quit sharing?
Let's have a look. No, it looks like it's still up.
Where's my little button that says stop sharing?
It's the joy of live.
It is the joy of life. Do you have a musical instrument you could play while I figure this out?
Don't do that to me.
Okay, I think I found the red button to get rid of it. So so I had a look at things like this for civilian war dead, and I just want to point out that, of course, all of our records can really tug at your heart. But when you look at the civilian war dead for the Blitz in the United Kingdom, they can be just terribly sad, because a lot of them are going to be 2 people, 3 people, 4 people in one household, all killed in one incident. So I had a look at Ealing Borough before, and when I organized the data in date form, like as in by the first, to get the oldest one first, the top one was a baby that was 2 months old that was killed when their house was bombed. And it's just so terribly sad. It's so sad. But of course, you get to that point with all of our information at some point in the day when you're looking at it. With civilian war dead, though, these are people. You'll have the address where the bomb struck. You'll have maybe the hospital where they died later of their injuries. And it really is just, it's a very powerful way of seeing the cost of this kind of warfare meted out both here in the United Kingdom upon the population here, but of course, where were all of our bombers going, taking off from here and going to Europe? Yeah. So, I'm going to quote from a general from another war and just remind us all that war is hell. But, when it comes to looking at these records of these, old and young men and women that we commemorate, civilian and military, it really does, and it should, I think, give you pause.
Totally. Well, I think that leads us nicely onto a bit of time for questions, I think, as we're nearly at our nearly at the full hour. Yep. But yeah, massive thanks. People have been commenting like mad. I mean, I feel bad that we've been so busy talking that I've had to kind of ignore them a little bit.
Questions, come. There's
been lots. I think. Are you familiar with a Jackie Horn? Jackie says hello.
I think I might know who Jackie Horn is.
Well, I think you've got some chums in the comments. There are a few people saying hi now.
My goodness.
Thanks to everybody who's turned up. I also saw someone making I think it was Chris Lang, who said that her husband served in 249 Squadron. Wow, which is a fantastic coincidence. And I also noticed someone in the comments say about 249 Squadron operation books are available on the National Archives. While, as Lynelle said before, while most records are still held by the MOD, there are some resources online. For example, we have original combat reports for the Battle of Britain, which I was looking at before. You can find Mica in, as well as the operations books. So I just wanted to give those a quick shout out. And actually, before we take a quick look at questions, you guys do your own live broadcast, don't you? So if people have enjoyed this and want to follow you and keep up to date with what you're doing, where would they find you?
Well, they should look for the Commonwealth War Graves Commission on Facebook and become our friend. And then they will hear about our Facebook Lives, which usually are on Thursdays. So, hey, you could go on Thursday to us and then come here on Friday to Findmypast. and it would be delightful to have you all join us for those. And of course, follow us on other social channels as you like to hear more about what we're up to in those we commemorate. And you can join our charitable foundation that helps us do really important community and educational initiatives. All information on our website.
So you heard it, people. You know how important the work the Commission is. So yeah, give it your support. Let it carry on doing this incredibly important work and commemorating these. I mean, we're all family historians. We're all in the business of stories, and this is commemorating stories that really do need to be preserved, I believe, anyway. So yeah, let's have a look at, obviously, apologies to people who've submitted questions and we haven't had a chance to answer. This was quite a meaty topic, so we'll do as many as we can in the next couple of minutes. One thing that actually not one person's been asking, but a lot of people have been asking, is that if you would like to have information tied to a headstone or a record updated, could you do that? And how would you go about doing it?
So on our website, if you search for amending records, you'll see a little FAQ answer to how to go about suggesting something that you think might need to be amended, or read that and then email inquiries@cwgc.org with the details of the person and the information, and most importantly, the evidence to back up what you think needs to be altered. And then those will be considered by the relevant department, and it might be that there is something that we need to and can update.
Brilliant. Well, there'll be quite a lot of happy viewers there, because that was something that quite a lot of people have asked. Oh, so someone's just noticed as well, lots of comments saying how fascinating everybody's been finding this. And one of our regular viewers, Chris Lang, has said another sad thing she's been reading is mortuary records for Blitz deaths. Very, very sad to read, and usually held at local archives. Thanks as always for recommending that, Chris. Right, let's have a look at some of the other questions we got, and we did get a few. So here you go. So this one's from another one of our very regular viewers, Anya. Hello, Anya. Anya said, if you find a relative on CWGC with very minimal information on them, is there, oh no, that's the same question. Is there a way of giving additional information? I need to read these through. So a guy called Guy Lee saying, my great uncle was killed in Italy in 1944 and is buried at Monte Cassino. The records show he was originally buried elsewhere, and it's got a reference like 2CGRRU.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is there any way I can find out where the original location was, and how would I go about doing that?
Now, if I had a longer time to answer this, I could be slightly more helpful. I'll start by saying that it was completely normal. In fact, it was standard planned practice for the Second World War campaigns like in Italy, where they knew that there would be dying and that there would be progress, that they were going to choose where to bury the bodies initially, and then they were definitely going to pick a different site to bring those bodies into when the war was over. So initially people were buried all over Italy, Perth, the fighting, but then they were after the war, or after the war had moved away from that area, they were moved again into larger groups to create large and beautiful cemeteries like the one at Monte Cassino. So that's it's very normal. It's not strange. But what you would need to look at to figure out where those were is you'd need to look at our grave registration reports to see specifically what's written on there. Sometimes we name the site, sometimes we give a map reference, but then of course the thing with map references is you need to find the right map on which the reference works. So yes, it is possible, but it isn't something that you can do with a snap of a finger, let's say, but it is a very interesting investigative trail to follow.
And like with, I know for example, for the First World War, you can find out incredible amounts of detail about deaths with things like regimental diaries. Is there anything similar for the second that you could try and use to pinpoint locations or sites?
Certainly, writing at the time, military writing at the time, so things like war diaries and what have you, can often reveal to you place names, let's say, that might be helpful. So a cemetery may have been named, I don't know, Old Windmill Cemetery, and we moved the bodies out and we don't have it anymore. But you might find in a unit that was based in that area that they also talk about Old Windmill Cemetery and maybe say where it is. They might give a map reference, they might describe it. and that can be helpful. But you can find yourself looking at a lot and finding out nothing, which is the joy of historical research.
That's family history. That's family history.
Yes, but it's possible to do that, and I've been able to nail down some things like that by that. The thing to remember is that also burying is being done by the military. So there may be unit records of the Royal Engineers or other units involved in the creation of cemeteries and the marking of graves that might leave useful information behind. That would still be with the MOD or with the National Archives, because it's not CWGC work, so it doesn't belong to us. It doesn't sit in our archive.
Brilliant. Oh, someone's got some very helpful viewers here giving a public engagement at CWGC if you have a group that would like the team to talk to.
Yes, thank you. I want to mention the public engagement, which I was going to say, we have a network of public engagement coordinators around the United Kingdom. If you would like to get in touch and get involved, then the address to start with would be, as they've said, public.engagement@cwgc.org. And these lovely public engagement coordinators run local volunteer and supporter groups on Facebook, which you can look up. If you look up CWGC volunteers and supporters of, then you'll see the different regions in the United Kingdom, and you can join one of those. I know they're interacting with people digitally at the moment rather than physically going places. But looking forward to the time when that's again allowed.
Cool, and actually that leads me quite nicely on to another one in this kind of similar vein of being separated from physical locations and not being able to go. But so quite a few people have been asking if they did want to leave a tribute, but they're not in the same country and they don't have the ability to travel there. Is there a way they could do that? There
is. Now we've built something where people can leave virtual tributes online, which is the social campaign is #ShareYourTribute. If you want to do that, go to our website. You can click on the banner about Share Your Tribute, and there you can perform a virtual act of remembrance. You can upload a photograph. You can write a message of remembrance for someone that we commemorate. You can look up their entry and link it to the casualty entry. So that's a wonderful way that you can virtually leave a tribute. You can also, of course, virtually visit them and visit their comrades by looking up cemeteries on our website and having a look at what we say about them and looking at pictures of them, downloading the list of everybody there and having a look at the data and the kinds of people and the stories that might be hiding there. That's another way of visiting when you can't visit. But of course, now in the United Kingdom, we are able to visit outdoor things. And I have to say, cemeteries and memorials, very outdoor things, and not too difficult to practice social distancing while doing so because you're outdoors. So do have a look. You probably have war graves very near you in the United Kingdom. I mean, very near you.
Like we discussed this before, and when you're probably, I mean, they're dotted in parish, probably almost every parish churchyard, not obviously all of them,
and every town or city, large cemetery that dates from, that were burying people back in the day, they'll have war graves in as well. So if you go on our website to find a cemetery or memorial, there's a little thing that says cemeteries near me. And you can click on that and you can put in your information, and then it will show you the ones within 10 miles of where you are.
And of course, even individual graves, you're probably never more than like 30-40 miles away.
Yeah.
I'm just making that up.
Yeah, no, I mean, in fact, if you were in the farthest reaches of Scotland, you'd probably be 30 or 40 miles.
Oh, really?
If you're in a more built up area, you're probably more like 3 miles away from a war grave, or in London, a point of commemoration as well, like say Tower Hill Memorial, or Westminster Abbey, where of course there is the unknown soldier, and that is a war grave and belongs to us.
Well, I think that's quite a poignant thing to reflect on, the sheer number of them, really. Someone's just reminded me in the comments as well. Sorry guys, I didn't forget about question of the week. Question of the week was, did your ancestors give their lives for their country? Thank you to everybody who's shared those in the comments. That was just to get everyone talking and to share your own discoveries and your own research. But I think we might have time for one more question. which is, I'm going to pick a very general one because it'll hopefully help lots of people. A few people have also asked this, is what would be your tips for finding a serviceman if you only have their surname? If you knew they were killed, but you only have their surname. Of course, if you've got an incredibly unusual surname, that's not going to be an issue. But if you're a Cox like me, that would be a bit of a nightmare.
Well, I have to say that if you know absolutely nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing else, it's going to be very difficult to know for sure that you've found the one that you were hoping to look for. Ideally, to be able to narrow it down, you need to be pretty sure about perhaps what branch of service they were in. Are they Army, Navy, Air Force? Really, you need to know which war, hopefully, and anything else that you think you might know about them in terms of where they might be buried or commemorated, in terms of country, like if you would narrow it down by Canada, where of course we have many hundreds of sites, and that sort of thing, then you could, but it is very difficult. So this can be a real challenge when you're working off of something like, say, a school war memorial or even a village war memorial, where you have a surname and maybe a single initial. And yes, you might know it's the First World War, but yes, unless the name is very specific, you probably are going to have difficulty in discerning which W. Smith of the First World War it is that that might be looking for. But of course, if it's a village war memorial, there ought to in some way be a connection to that village. That might be difficult or easy to figure out. School war memorials may be underpinned in the school archive by lists of war dead in an old school magazine, old registers for the school. Potentially somebody did a research project in the 1960s and put it in the library. There are all sorts of little backdoor ways to try and find more about the people so that you can come to our website with enough ammunition, if you'll let me, to be able to find the person that you really are looking for. But it's definitely a challenge if you don't have a lot of detail that is for sure correct about the person that you're looking for.
Brilliant. Well, I think as I mean, I could quite happily carried on talking for another 2 hours, you know. So hopefully it would be great to get you on again at some point in the not too distant future.
Well, it would be my pleasure. I do feel bad that we didn't run through lots of questions, so.
We can do that another time. And I think, what we were talking about, it looks like a lot of people have found this very useful. So yeah, thanks to everybody that's tuned in. Thank you to everybody that's posted a question. Remember, follow the Commonwealth War Graves Commissions, check them out on Facebook, tune into their live broadcasts. Is it hashtag share your tribute?
Share your tribute, yes,
hashtag
please.
Share your tribute.
Yeah. In fact, I had a challenge for people on that regard. I found a book on my shelf. I know some of us find ourselves with a little more time at home these days. So I want to challenge you, if you think you've got a book in your home that might mention somebody who died in the First or Second World Wars, have you ever looked up to see where they're commemorated? You could, and then you could pop to share my tribute and put something up about that person. So I had a look in this, wonderful book here, which is on my shelf. It's called Flying Start, and it's by Hugh Dundas, whose nickname was Cocky, by the way.
That's a great one.
And it's really one of my favorite memoirs about the Second World War fighter pilot. It's beautifully written. And he, if I flip through to page 53, he was in 616 Squadron for the fighter for the Battle of Britain. And he mentions by name several of his mates in that squadron, who then went on to be killed in the Battle of Britain in August. And so I went ahead and had a look on our website to see where they all were. And they are spread out, as I would have thought, so that there's one on Runnymede Memorial, and then the others are in churchyards or cemeteries around the country. But it's just wonderful to be able to read the description about a person as a person. You know, they talk about how they were like in the mess, you know, what they cared about. And those sorts of things. And then, of course, you can pop to our website and see where they're officially commemorated by the Commission, should you ever wish to go and see that point yourself, because of the relationship you have with them through a book that mentions them. So share your tribute.
We can leave it on a mission. There you go, viewers. That's your challenge. to help us commemorate these incredible people. So yeah, I think we'll have to leave it there. But thank you so much, Lynelle. This has been brilliant, and the comments are reflecting that too. Lots of people saying very, very interesting. Thank you so much. So yeah, we will stay in touch. I'm sure hopefully we'll see you on here again at some point in the future.
Thank you. That would be my pleasure. Thanks to all of the commenters and watchers.
Fantastic. So have wonderful weekends, everybody. I'm going to figure out how to end the stream, which may take some time. No, I worked out. Brilliant. Okay. Stay safe, everybody. Stay in touch, and we will speak to you very, very soon. Bye-bye.